Ladies and gentlemen, our presentation is now beginning. Stan, please go ahead.
It's a CFO's job to manage financial risks, so you'd think getting the CFO's buy-in on a data backup and recovery strategy would be easy. As we know, that's not always the case. That's because some CFOs focus solely on minimizing costs. They see data protection as yet another expense coming from an IT department that already spends a lot of money. To get your CFO on board, you need a plan. Hi, I'm Stan Gibson, and I'll be your host and moderator for this live interactive e-seminar. In a moment, we'll hear from two experts on this topic who have the information you need to sell backup to your CFO. They are Christine Taylor, analyst with the Taneja Group. It's great to have you here for this e-seminar, Christine. And also Dave LeClaire,
Thank you.
Vice President of Product
Marketing. Excited to be here.
Sorry, Christine. Thought we were going to miss you there. Great to have you with us.
Thanks.
Also, Dave LeClaire, Vice President of Product Marketing at Unitrends, a provider of data protection and business continuity solutions. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be here.
Before we dive into our discussion, just a quick word about this e-seminar. We are live and interactive, and that means we want to hear from you and our audience. We encourage you to ask questions, and it's easy. Just type your question into the Q&A box on your screen and then press the Submit button. We'll answer your question during the Q&A segment toward the end. To participate, you will need to disable your pop-up blocker. Please use the green Resources widget to download a copy of the slides to your desktop. Also, you're invited to participate by utilizing any of several social networking tools. You can tweet or directly post information to social media sites, including blogging platforms, bookmarking sites, social news sites, and social networking sites, all right from the console. To do this, just scroll along the bottom of your screen and click on the Share This widget. Finally, please note that every window you currently see, from the slide window to the Q&A window, can be enlarged or collapsed. So if you want to change the look and feel of your console, please feel free to do so. And now, without further ado, Christine Taylor. Christine.
Thank you so much. All right. Now, as we know, today's topic is how to sell backup to your CFO, which can be a very good trick in a number of organizations, and we'll talk to you about how to do this. Very briefly, I'm an analyst with the Taneja Group. One of the things what's most important to us is that we don't hype things. We want to serve the IT audience. Hype gets headlines. That's why people use it. But it doesn't do very much for productive discussions about vendors and about business needs. So we like to tell the truth about what works to IT customers and to the vendors we serve. This is particularly important in situations like this, where IT is dealing with flat budgets and growing workloads, and at the same time is understanding the attractiveness of backup and recovery platforms that are integrated, flexible, scalable, broad, and deep. But it is exactly these kinds of platforms that usually go over CapEx thresholds and that you're going to need to sell to your CFO. We're going to talk about how to do this. Now, first of all, when do you need to sell backup to the CFO? In the case that I just talked about, you will, and we're going to be spending most of this time with you today talking in practical terms about how you can do it. I will assure you that this 20 minutes or so of my talk will not be an accounting lesson. I'm sure we're all really grateful for that. What I will be talking about is how to talk in the business language that your CFO understands in order to sell a backup and recovery purchase request. Now, first of all, CFOs and IT do not talk very often. The CIO might speak to the CFO, but even that does not necessarily mean that the CIO is sending proposals the CFO's way and getting back approvals. But the CFO's smart. You will not be talking down to them. What you won't be doing is speaking your own language of technology, and when you're doing product research or comparative technology points. These you use internally and with your vendors. What the CFO's language is the language of business risk and reward. This is how you're going to cast the type and the wording that you need for your proposal. Now, of course, you don't always need to involve the CFO. Some of the time you don't even want to. It's not a slam on the CFOs, it's a reality. You're the one who knows what backup your company needs. For that matter, you're the one who knows virtualization, replication, cloud backup, disaster recovery, failover. The CFO doesn't have to know any of these technical details and is perfectly happy not to. But here's the thing. In companies where CFOs and IT do not talk, that's not in fact uncommon. A recent survey said that in 64% of mid-sized companies with CFOs do not solicit input from IT when creating the budgets. Now, IT has a budget, of course, and you probably get a percentage cost increase or decrease just like every other department. And as long as IT purchases and possibly operating expenditures, we'll talk more about that later, but certainly as long as the purchases stay within the budget and under a set capital expense figure, then the CFO doesn't have to talk to them, and IT doesn't have to talk to the CFO. But what happens when backup and recovery become an issue? When one more point product isn't going to solve performance, capacity, or backup management problems, when one more product isn't going to allow you to verify backup across all applications. In fact, shoveling in one more product is going to make matters worse. You know that your company needs to make a substantial investment in new backup platforms. Now, this is the way that IT usually goes about it. And by the way, I came out of IT, and I know exactly how this works. You certainly, of course, you do preliminary research to understand typical features and costs. You're not talking formal RFPs yet or presentations, although you probably will talk to your top 2 or 3 vendors who you think you might want to work with. Now, once you've got some sort of dollar figure for feature, maybe even dollar per terabyte estimates, then you go to the CFO and ask for the budget for backup. What you are likely to get is a blank look and the promise to include the item in next year's budget decisions. That is not what you need, and it's not what the company needs. But you're not getting that budget because you haven't worked out for the CFO why you need the budget for a new backup. Your CFO needs to understand your request in terms of not general business even, but specific business of risk and reward. That is the CFO's job, and they do need to be able to do it with your help. Now, you're not going to need to convince the CFO that you need backup. Everyone knows that. But their point is that you already have budget already, so why do you need different backup? Why can't you use the money in your budget already? Present what you need in terms of business health. For example, the term business continuity is more aligned with business goals than backup is. In your mind, in IT's mind, the comparison, the identification is instantaneous. You know what backup does. You know that backup and restore confirm business continuity. But the CFO does not necessarily, not without thinking about it, and even then probably will not get all of the similar points. For example, then, what you will need to do is not simply talk about backup, but concentrate on slow restore times that are completely inadequate to server and application business needs. Explain in terms of cost how much downtime cost the company suffers while IT is restoring data. The slower the process and the higher priority the lost application, the more money being lost. This is a business argument that the CFO will understand. And if a new backup platform is the cost of protecting business, they will be willing to listen. Remember, though, that they aren't going to listen for long. You might have as little as 15 minutes to make the initial presentation. Now, if they're interested in this, there will be longer ones, more fact-seeking, more detail, but you've got to make the first one not be the last. Don't use that time to present highly technical language. Even if your CFOs come out of IT, which honestly is unlikely, that's not what they're there for. What will keep their attention is business-oriented visuals, dollar amounts tied to data loss, analogies of loss and gain, and examples of data loss in similar industries, and how your company is going to be able to avoid them with this new purchase. Now, we can take the word backup out of this and talk about the general question the CFO needs the answers to. Well, they need to know what is the minimum that they can spend, the company can spend, but they can approve to make the business safe. Now, in this case, safety can mean lost revenue. It can mean the need for layoffs. It can mean not meeting financial or analyst goals, losing shareholders, losing stock prices. What is the minimum they can spend to grow the business and hit those financial goals? And what happens if they don't spend on a particular project? Now, this is company-wide. There will always be risks with every business decision, but understanding, preparing for financial risks is the CFO's job. Now, let's get more specific into data protection, specifically backup and recovery. In terms of the language that you need to use, what are the minimal costs of protecting data against loss? What are the costs for optimal protection? And what are the costs related to risk for doing nothing, for making no change? Now, you don't necessarily want to talk about how your present backup platform is a huge disaster. The reason is that you still want and need the CFO to understand your competency so that you are protecting this company against data loss in a heroic effort. You won't use that term, but that's the idea you're going to get across with the equipment you have now. However, you will make the point that your present infrastructure is no longer adequate to risk. You want and the company needs to build a new backup infrastructure that will protect the business in its present state, which is the minimal expectation, and into the future under conditions of data growth, which is the optimal expectation. Now let's talk a little bit more about avoiding Techspeak. IT doesn't know when they're doing it. That's because the people that we most often talk to are each other. And even when we're doing computer or system support, generally the end users who are supporting don't want to know. Or if they ask questions, their eyes glaze over in the first 5 seconds because really we want to get in and out and we want to fix it. But that's not good enough for the CEO and the presentation of backup and recovery products. Now, what we are going to primarily base the presentation on is really, you can think about it, the analogy of insurance. Unitrends has produced a very good white paper that I'm sure will be available to you soon, if not today, which is how to sell backup to the CFO. And one of the main points that this paper makes is the insurance metaphor. No one wants a disaster to happen, but you better be able to cover it if it does. That's why the language of risk, which is far easier to quantify and project with backup and recovery than the language of gains. The risk-based discussion is going to be particularly important with the CFO. Now, your presentation will not be all doom and gloom, i.e. avoiding risk. You do want to present a potential return on new backup. You'll need to do both of these things, a firm grasp of the company's goals and how the C-suite measures progress. Now, hopefully, if you are the CIO, you certainly know this already. If you are not, then speak to your CIO and together find out what the language is that the company is using. Then present your budget request in those terms. Business continuity, again, generally well understood. There is a very large company who has just finished up a year of saving on operational expenses. A new backup and recovery program with an emphasis on saving on OPEX expenses is going to be a very, very good way of doing this. You're going to brainstorm the terms most applicable to backup and your business: compliance, risk of data loss, downtime, and communicate that IT strategy accordingly. Now, the next slide is exactly what your CFO is going to be thinking if you could see the thought bubbles around his or her head. If the disk is not the same topology, thick version media, tiers of disk, don't do it. Don't be tempted to go that way. You need to go that way with your internal team and with your vendors, not with the CFO. That's not what they need or want to hear. Instead, discuss the consequences of data loss. You are going to be talking about what could happen to this company if this, if that, and then. Now, luckily, the numbers for data loss, the costs of downtime, are fairly readily available. Harder to get hold of the performance gains equations, and we will talk about that. But risk is the hardest numbers, and frankly is going to be the biggest priority for you and for the CFO. For example, Timico, who's a UK communication service provider, surveyed IT managers just this last March and found that over 70% of IT managers had never worked out the cost of the unplanned downtime. Now, that's an internal statistic for you, for the IT department, to do exactly that. Those who have worked out the costs have a big bunch of arrows in their quiver for selling their proposal. Research from a research firm called Vance & Byrne, for example, surveyed over 3,000 IT decision makers from mid-sized to enterprise-class businesses. These were 24 countries, primarily in the West, a lot of UK and a lot of US. Per business, average downtime was about 25 hours within 12 months. They calculated a total of costs for data loss and downtime, applied it to all companies as a total, the share total, of $1.5 trillion across 12 months. Now, if you're a small business, of course you're not going to break down neatly in that average. Mid-size and enterprise will bear more of the burden, but that is a lot of money and a lot of money per company. Here are some more stats for you. Backup point products are very common in the data center. Most data centers have at least some environments with that infrastructure as you buy point backup for different application servers and virtualized networks. But research is also showing that businesses using 3 or more backup vendors in the data center have 3 times as much data loss as those who unify their data protection around a single well-chosen vendor. Why? Lack of centralized management to begin with. The lack of backup verification on a couple servers, or maybe have it on a third. The inability to monitor and report using the same screenshots and dashboards to understand what you are losing. And also the costs of the point products were also steeper when taken in total than that of a unified platform. Why? Because point product purchases usually flew under the CapEx reporting threshold and were covered in the yearly budget. And even though you didn't necessarily have to go to the CFO over each one, their total cost may well exceed the cost of a new platform. Now let's look at another example. This is how to calculate the cost of your downtime. You might, for example, take time and length of lost access to data, so let's say 12 hours of downtime, labor cost per hour per person, average that out, and don't forget to assign opportunity costs since revenue producers can't work. So say a long outage of 12 hours at a mid-sized company, you could easily be talking about a total downtime cost, $20,000. And for an enterprise with high transactional applications, that number could easily scale into the hundreds of thousands for those 12 hours. Within these examples, it's very reasonable to sell items like continuous backup, backup verification, fast restore times, close restore points to the CFO in the name of business protection. A lot of this has to do with building a clear picture for that CFO, not only avoiding Techspeak, but giving him or her exactly the kinds of examples that they need to do for you what you need them to do. One of the big things to do is to concentrate on benefits, on hard benefits and soft, on the total cost of ownership, and return on investment. These things your vendors should be able to help you with, by the way. You're not having to do this in a vacuum or completely on your own. Have your vendors help you with the TCO and ROI projections. Their projections are going to be positive for them, of course. You do want to check reality, but they're going to be used to giving you these kinds of numbers. But you're also going to want to talk about the business value of the key performance indicators, KPI, and key risk indicators, KRI, of backup and recovery platforms. Now, typical performance indicators for KPI. This has to do with how quickly that you can give things back, the performance of your recovery, the performance of I/O and latency, particularly when restoring from the cloud or over the WAN, what different storage types are needed, what downtime is planned and unplanned. You're going to relate these metrics to business health. With the KRI, that becomes the risk of not adopting a particular product. And this can go, when I talk about external examples, I mean within the company as a whole, not only impacting IT, application non-use, non-compliance, failed service levels, and internal to IT, which you should also put in there. It's management time related to these point products where you cannot work on those strategic initiatives and, frankly, on those applications that's easier to, quote, productivity gains on. You don't have time for that. And there's no way to get it with the infrastructure that you have right now. Now, tie risk and reward to three domains: to capital expenditures, to operational expenditures, and to productivity or productivity gains. Now, for CapEx, controlling and even lowering your capital spend without sacrificing necessary features is going to be the name of the game. And this is exactly why it's often the middle vendor who wins the negotiations. They're not as expensive as the highest price vendor, but they still have most, if not all, of the desired features, and they certainly have all the critical ones. So one key to for you, talking to the CFO about CapEx, is to concentrate on flexibility that lowers cost over time. For example, present a backup technology that is a certain price point for the capital expenditure, but it's also inherently scalable, so the company won't have to replace equipment in a couple of years. Another benefit to the original CapEx purchase is, say, a single management console, which immediately saves on IT time, lets you retain your present headcount. You may like to grow it, but if that's the cost of doing business, is not growing your headcount, you can still do the job that you need to do with the new platform because of their productivity features built into their product. Now, CapEx OpEx is even more important. In fact, many CIOs are turning their attention away from capital expenditure and moving towards operational expenditure. There's both negative and positive reasons for doing so. One of the reasons is that CFOs have been bitten once too often by high operating costs around IT staff time, energy usage, the cost of scalability, licensing and maintenance agreements. IT's been bitten too, no doubt about it. But the CFO's seen that money come through in the operational budget. CFOs want more predictable OpEx when calculating the cost to the company. Now, some of it's positive. When a operational spend is relatively predictable, such as your vendor is very open about future licensing and maintenance costs. They're not always, but the good ones are. Then that CapEx cost, which is predictable, means that they are comfortable with a lower CapEx cost for perhaps a lower OpEx with perhaps higher CapEx, because that translates into more cash on hand at the time of purchase. Doing without a very, very large capital expenditure is going to free up financial resources while allowing the CFO and IT to plan for upcoming OpEx spends. Now, I mentioned soft benefits before. This is almost near the end of my talk, so I'm going to do this. I'm not going to spend a great deal on time of this, but do bring it up. Keep your conversation as much as possible with quantification by dollar. Fairly easy to do with risk, not as easy to do with productivity. This is exactly where your time is going to come in. You are, for example, going to be able to keep the data center more optimized because you will have time to run the necessary optimized procedures to decrease downtime or not have it at all, to be able to fail over in case of planned or unplanned downtime, to offer high availability because your backup and recovery data protection packages offers you ways to operate even during outages, and because you're able to strategically operate your backup and recovery because you can do it more efficiently with the same amount of people and perhaps less time, certainly more value. You're able to turn your time and attention to even more strategic initiatives of even greater and frankly easier to prove quantification to the company. Finally, trim that presentation until it's concise, until every point ties directly to cost and benefits. Now, it's okay and probably a good idea to come in with an appendix that you know you may not be creating at the time. It will be available to you, and you will have it already in case of future talks, which is going to happen because your CFO agrees with your evaluation, understands and agrees with your quantification, but keep the initial presentation concise without Techspeak. Now, finally, for my part of this talk, we know this isn't easy, but it is doable. Your vendor will help you. You'll get better at it with practice, and the numbers are out there. It is worth it. And with the experience that you have making the business case for the backup and recovery platform, additional projects become that much easier to sell. Now, here to tell you more about doing it successfully and Unitrends' approach is Dave LeClaire, who is the Unitrends VP of Product Marketing. Dave?
Thank you, Christine. In my section of the talk, I'm going to quickly hit on some of the high points that Christine hit, just as a transition to start talking specifically about how Unitrends approaches this as well. And then we'll spend a little bit of time actually going through the Unitrends portfolio and how our particular solution solves many of these problems in a very simple way that will resonate with both IT and with your CFO. So just to reemphasize, you need to empathize with your CFO. You need to kind of present things at that C-level perspective. He's used to making a lot of decisions very frequently with summary information. So as Christine said, you don't want to go in with a huge amount of technical jargon, and you basically want to present him with a compelling case that boils down to something that gets really to the heart of the matter quickly, and then present the solution as that you're proposing as the answer to that challenge. So we do have a white paper on selling backup to your CFO, and we do use the insurance metaphor in it. And there's a couple reasons why we do that. One reason is the insurance metaphor certainly resonates with the risk of business mortality. And data risk, data loss, and downtime can have a really catastrophic effect on a business's ability to maintain their interests long term. This stat was from a study from the University of Texas that stated that 94% of companies suffering a catastrophic data loss do not survive. 43% of those never opened, and 51% closed within 2 years. There's many other studies that have similar types of data. There was one that was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers that basically indicated that 7 out of 10 small firms that experience a major data loss go out of business within a year. 30% of businesses that have a major fire go out of business within a year, 70% within 5 years. All these types of things that can have a catastrophic effect on your data and your ability to keep your business up and running isn't just the local challenge of what you actually have of getting your systems online, whether that outage is 15 minutes, 2 hours, or several days or longer. Even the smaller ones can have a catastrophic effect depending on which systems they hit and the impact of it. The other reason why the insurance metaphor works so well is the CFO is someone who focuses a lot on compliance as well. And different industries obviously have different regulations, but all of these different regulatory requirements for SOX and HIPAA and ITIL and DPA that are targeted at different vertical markets all have requirements for reporting, all have requirements generally for data retention. Some of them have very long-term retention requirements. And having a system that's in place that makes that easy is another way of ensuring that you're not going to be hit with fines, you're not going to be hit with regulatory issues that are going to cause a negative impact on your business as well. However, like all metaphors, the insurance metaphor breaks down when you start going into more detail. So it is important to move beyond just that basic insurance metaphor and do focus somewhat on optimizing productivity. And with the modern backup solutions that are in the market today, you can go a long way towards improving your productivity, both at the CapEx as well as at the OpEx level, as well as your SLAs around recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives. So looking at CapEx expenditures, one way to optimize your CapEx is to make sure that you don't overbuy and you stay as flexible as possible. And this means you need to buy a system that actually has some flexibility, that as your data center needs morph and change, and we are in a time when many companies are shifting to a cloud-based model, shifting to more agile development methods, moving systems that were previously physical into virtualized environments, maybe not all at once, maybe doing it piecemeal. Having a solution that is as flexible as possible to be able to maintain coverage across all those systems and all those environments as they're changing, and be able to handle the really dramatic growth that we're seeing in data and systems without running into issues is an important way that you can optimize CapEx. When we look at operational expenses, it's not simply the ongoing cost of the actual tool that you're buying, but there are also a number of time wasters that absolutely consume operational expenses. Time wasters are things like having to spend time making sure your backup's complete because you don't quite trust your backup solution to always work properly, so you have to go in and spend extra time guaranteeing that things are up and running. That is a complete waste of your time. Trying to squeeze the last bit of performance out of whatever system you're at because it wasn't very flexible and it's not easily expandable. It doesn't work well with adding a new capacity or being able to push additional storage to the cloud. Basically means that as you start getting towards the top end of that solution, you start trying to do everything possible to make sure you don't have to buy something extra, and that can take up an awful lot of your time. And as I said, having a solution that does not adapt to an agile data center can be a tremendous waste of time and generate really high operational expenses. Ultimately, we do want to basically focus this in terms of real loss. So data loss and downtime cost real money. It isn't just about protecting just a subset of your systems. You need to protect all of your systems. You need to protect not just the data, you need to protect the virtual machines that rely on that data and the systems that rely on that data to make sure that they remain up. productivity loss can be calculated by looking at both your RPO and your RTO, how much data that you actually lost, as well as how long it's going to take you to get your systems back up. But when you're talking to the CFO, it's going to be really important to not frame it in those terms. It's going to be very important to frame it in terms of real loss. We want to actually make sure that we're spinning things in terms of high-level business objectives, not IT objectives. Talking about this critical database was down for an hour, therefore X, Y, and Z happened is not going to resonate as much as basically saying, if we lose these critical systems, we're not able to conduct business, so therefore we lose this amount of revenue, or we get imposed with this specific cost due to idle resources or fines or scrap material or whatever, depending on your particular business. So before I dive into the Unitrends specific stuff, I'll give you a couple do's and don'ts for pitching things to your customer. Pitching things to your CFO. You don't want to overcomplicate things. As I said, the CFO makes a lot of decisions. They generally do it fairly quickly, and they do it on summary information. You don't want to pitch it in those IT terms around, RTO, around your historian application, being down, therefore X, Y, and Z is going to happen. You do want to basically pitch it in a way that is in top-level business terms, which requires that you do need to know your cost of downtime. Boil that down to a problem statement and a solution, and then pitch that to your CFO. And if you pitch it in those top-level business terms, such as for every 15 minutes of downtime results in 200 widgets in lost manufacturing production, or 1 hour of downtime results in 150 lost transactions at an average sales price of $125. That gets it into very discrete dollar amounts that can then be compared to the cost of actually what you're pitching. And in almost all cases, all it takes is one downtime event every few months to justify the cost of having a modern, cost-effective backup and recovery solution in place. So Unitrends, of course, being a backup and recovery company, focuses on this. We strive to provide radically simple hybrid cloud backup and recovery. And we do this knowing full well that we're operating in an environment where IT's confidence in their infrastructure has been plunging over the past couple of years. As we've moved towards more complex infrastructures, as we've moved towards having things in physical and virtual and cloud environments, we've actually seen IT struggling to be able to recover as quickly as they once were able to. So this is actually a really interesting bit of data that has been run over the past couple of years, that we're asked users, were they able to recover for their most recent disruption in less than an hour? And we've gone from, in 2007, 30% saying yes, which isn't a terribly high number, but only 30% saying yes in 2007, down to only 2% saying it in the most recent time this was run in 2013. We want to be able to solve that and bring some confidence back to IT. We want you to be able to recover more than just your data. And what we mean by that is we absolutely want you to have solutions that protect your data, protect your systems, but we also realize that running backups and making sure that your backup and recovery environment's optimal is not what most IT folks want to spend their time doing. We know you want to focus on other things. You want to focus on what matters most, not your backup and DR. You need to focus on the critical projects that are going to move your business ahead, whether that is launching a new service for your business or doing some consolidation to get greater costs. There are all sorts of things that I'm sure you'd rather be working on than making sure that your backups are working properly. And we also realize that it's not just about focusing on professional goals, but we also want to have it so that your backup recovery environment is something that actually is able to bring you some confidence so you can go home at night, spend some time with your family, gain some work-life balance, knowing full well that there's a protection and recovery solution in place that's going to be there, and you have absolute confidence that it's going to work properly. So when we say recover more than just your data, it means focusing on recovering everything you care about. That means all the virtual machines and physical servers that that are in your environment. It means also recovering your confidence, recovering flexibility, recovering reliability and control of your environment, and simply recovering things like weekend and time to go do other things. So how do we go about doing that? Let me dive into a couple of these particular bullet points to cover it in a little bit more. So from a data and system standpoint, you should be looking for a best-in-class backup appliance. And whether that is a physical appliance or a virtual appliance really is dependent on what you want to deploy and how you want to deploy, whether you want an all-in-one solution, including the hardware, or if you have excess storage capacity and compute capacity and want just a software solution that will install as a virtual appliance. We do recommend going with an appliance. It takes a lot of the integration effort out of something that you need to worry about. It installs easy and gets you up and running very quickly. But a best-in-class enterprise solution for backup needs to provide radically simple local backup for archiving and recovery, but it also needs to have some cloud-empowered capabilities for DR and long-term retention. We've for a long time relied on things like tape and manually moving tapes around, and we're using rotational media to do archiving and get things to a secondary site. Cloud solutions and having backup copies that can be pushed to a cloud environment allow us to free up resources. We can automate a lot of those long-term retention and DR tasks and get data off-site into a secondary location that is managed 24/7 by somebody who's going to focus on making sure that that data is always there to recover. You can also start layering in disaster recovery services and the like on top of that as well. You also want to have a solution that has comprehensive support for everything that's in your environment, not just virtual machines, but legacy physical systems as well. We frequently talk with companies that actually do have multiple solutions. They have one solution for their virtual environment, they have another solution for their legacy systems, they have a third solution for some of their mission-critical systems running Windows or Linux. And as Christine said, that brings a lot of complexity in and forces you to expose yourself actually to more downtime. You should also look for a solution that can provide very fast instant recovery of both your virtual machines as well as Windows systems. We should be able to recover them locally as well as into a cloud solution. Last, we should look for something that actually has fantastic customer support and actually delivers something that we happen to call recovery assurance. And what we mean by recovery assurance is a solution that makes it very easy for you to have complete confidence that your backups in your DR environment is operating properly. You don't just want to automate something, hope that it works. By using recovery assurance, we can automate the testing of those environments so that every couple hours or every couple days, however often you want, we can generate a report that says we've validated that your backup in your DR environment is operating to your SLAs. We have certified that those applications at the application level will recover exactly as you'd expect, and that there hasn't been any drift between your production environment and your DR environment. And you can go home at night knowing that if you actually do have a failover or downtime event, that your backup in your DR is going to work exactly as you expect. So we do this through a solution portfolio that we have both physical appliances with our Unitrends recovery series. Those are hardware models that go from about 1 terabyte of raw storage all the way up to 182 terabytes of storage. We also have a software solution that does the exact same thing, but does it in a virtual appliance that is deployed as software. We can also deploy that software as installable software into a Linux environment. Unitrends starts with that so that you're protected locally with your backups, with enough retention locally so that you can recover from any local event. But we also think it's important to actually get things into the cloud so that you have things, so if a catastrophic event takes out your entire data center, you're still covered. And Unitrends Cloud delivers exactly that. It's a multi-tenant public cloud that is designed to work with our appliances to store copies of your backup and spin up DR virtual machines using those backup copies if you need to declare a disaster. On top of that, we can also layer our reliable DR, which is our recovery assurance product that will guarantee that your DR and backup is working as you'd expect it to. We do this across a wide variety of workload. We have a single solution, a single pane of glass that supports VMware, Hyper-V, over 200 different operating systems and applications, whether they're physical or virtual, are covered with our solution. So with a single tool, you can protect your entire environment. The next thing I wanted to focus on was talk just briefly about simplicity, because backup should be very simple. It's not something that we want you to have to worry about. We want you to be able to set things up very easily and quickly without looking at a lot of manuals. You should be able to set up recurring tasks so that most of your backup and recovery tasks are automated, and you don't have to do anything. However, when we automate things, we want to make sure that we're doing it in such a way that we're not only automating it, but we're validating that they're completing properly and they complete it as expected. Otherwise, you spend that time doing some of the wasted effort that we were talking about, spending time and cycles on verifying that backups are actually happening. That's only increases the stress. We want the solution to be extremely simple to use so that it can essentially drop to the background and work and have you absolute 100% confident that it's working as expected and it's going to be there when you need it. And we focused a lot on doing that. We've have a new user interface coming out where we've actually spent a lot of time optimizing the user experience, particularly for virtualized admins, but it's optimized for all IT administrators. And we focused on trying to minimize the number of clicks and the number of steps it takes to do any task. We're very pleased with our new user experience, and we invite you to take a look at it. The last thing I'm going to touch on briefly is Unitrends Cloud. We do have our own cloud. It's not a partner offered solution. It's actually Unitrends owned and run. It's available in 5 countries around the globe: the United States, Australia, Canada, Germany, and the UK. We have a couple different offers for it. Our No Limits Cloud actually will take everything that's actually on your physical recovery series appliance and pull that into the cloud as backup copies. So whatever's on your physical appliance locally gets put in the cloud. We also have a solution called Forever Cloud. And Forever Cloud actually is designed for those people that actually need long-term retention. For just a few cents per month per gigabyte, we basically will keep backups, copies of your backups for an infinite period of time. So we'll give you 7 daily backups, 4 weekly backups, 12 monthly backups, and an infinite number of yearly backups for that one low price. We do this so that your backup copies can be stored off-site. You don't have to worry about setting up your own disaster recovery center in a secondary location. We are highly secure. We're highly optimized. It's a complete white glove experience. And we're able to layer on top of that disaster recovery services and recovery assurance on top of it. With our DR environment, with our DR solution, we are able to guarantee an SLA to our customers that if you declare a disaster to us, we will get your critical VM that we have in our environment up and running with an SLA of less than 1 hour. It's a very cost-effective way of getting a DR solution up and running. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to invite you to visit unitrends.com, take a look at our solutions. We have a couple different trial offers that you can certainly try things out. We actually have a free version of our product that you can use to protect a small environment up to 1 terabyte of data for free. It's not time-bound. It's yours for use forever. We have a number of other free tools that are useful for you in planning, including some business continuity and DR planning tools. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap up this section and turn it back over to the Q&A section.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Dave, for a fascinating presentation. We do have a number of interesting questions in the queue. If you haven't had a chance to ask a question yet, please do so now. Just type it into the Q&A box on your screen and hit the submit button. Well, let's go to our first question. And the first question is, how do I make sure that I don't overbuy? How should I gauge how much data I will have?
It's a great question. And what we do is we do have a fairly simple model where we try to work with the customer to understand what their typical backup size is and how much local retention they need. So do they need 5 copies of that data local? So if your typical backup is 2 terabytes and you need a week's worth of retention, we will put you into an appropriate sized box. And part of the reason why we have 14 different models of our recovery series is we want to not have you overbuy. We have 14 different models, various different sizing, so we can kind of tune them into a particular size. However, the way to kind of think about this is data is going to continue to expand. And we will work with you if your data expands faster than you expect it to over the next couple of years. We have trade-in programs and things like that where you can basically trade in your old appliance, we'll give you a credit, and you can move up to a larger box. But more and more often, we're seeing people use the cloud as a way to gain some flexibility and push copies of their data to the cloud, and therefore kind of keep a smaller box on site, or take some of their retention backup copies that they might have been holding locally and push those to the cloud, and then be able to back up a larger data set within their local environment. So the cloud is really a great way, by working with a hybrid cloud backup solution that does not only local backup, but also has the ability to push backup copies to the cloud, is a great way of actually making sure that you have some flexibility in the future. And if your data grows, we're there to work with you to upsize you to the next size appliance.
Okay, thanks, David. Our next question goes right to the topic of this e-seminar, how to sell to your CFO. And the question is, what in terms of RPO and RTO should be presented?
This is Christine. I actually would like to hear from Dave on this as well, but I don't think that I had time to cover this in my presentation, so let me offer this briefly. The terms that you need to do that's going to help you the most, the presenting these to the CFO, is prioritizing application and cost of downtime. It's helpful to start with general downtime costs this company, blah, blah. But honestly, the cost of downtime for a third-tier application, while annoying, might not affect your customer at all, while the cost of a Tier 1 customer-facing transactional database are going to be huge. And a number of Tier 2s, or what we might think of as business critical as opposed to mission critical, could do nearly as much damage as your internal functionality. Say Exchange Server goes down for a few hours, that a client-facing mission-critical application might do. So it's best to qualify what RPO and RTO you do need to protect by application. Within that, talk about how much risk you're talking about, and then talk about the gains of being able to have very, very close RPO and seconds, perhaps, or minutes long RTO for your top flight applications.
Yeah, I think it's going to be different for, I absolutely agree with Christine that looking at it on an application basis is kind of the way to get the answer. I don't know if you necessarily want to present, every application in the, even Tier 2 applications to the CFO without having his eyes start glazing over. That said, I do think it's important to focus on knowing what your critical applications are and what the cost of those downtime actually is. And truly knowing the cost of the downtime. And it's not simply idle resources, or there's a lot of things that can go into it. I've been in the kind of fault-tolerant, kind of high availability space for a number of years now, and every company is different as far as which applications are critical. There are some companies that email is not critical to them at all, and there are others that email goes down, their entire business grinds to a halt, and they get nothing done. There are others that, e-commerce and their website is absolutely critical, while some other companies, if their website goes down for a day, it's annoying, but they're not really going to lose too much business. So knowing specifically what's going to be most critical for your particular business and knowing what the cost of that is going to be to your business in terms of dollars, in terms of scrap if you're a manufacturer, potential loss of reputation if you're in a consumer business. There are a lot of things that go into it. It's going to be very specific for your business, but come up with the top handful of areas and get it boiled down to that. I had a conversation not that long ago with a grocery store chain, and they told us that the most critical application they had was their check cashing and payment terms that does their credit card applications. That goes down for even 5 minutes. They essentially have to tell people, hang on, we're going to have our cash registers up in 5 minutes. People will just leave the store. So that's their most critical application. But every business is going to be different.
Well, great answer, Dave and Christine. Our next question. Our CFO doesn't have an IT background. Why am I not surprised? Will this be a problem?
Well, again, not as much as you might think. It certainly represents a challenge in that IT is going to need to speak in the business terms, as Dave said, the summary statements that the CFO needs. But even if your CFO came out of IT and is, in fact, familiar with current backup and recovery technology, they're not going to want to hear about it in that respect because they've got to then present it to their board. They need to talk it over with other senior level executives, in most cases, depending on the scope of it. They're not going to want to do your job for you, which is to translate the numbers into a summary business statement.
Okay, next question. How can I translate how can I calculate TCO and ROI? Total cost of ownership and return on investment.
Total cost of ownership. There's a lot that goes into that. We actually do have some tools that kind of help walk through total cost of ownership calculations, because it comes down to not only the cost of the initial acquisition, but it's also going into the long-term operational costs. Another thing that we actually like to focus on, if we're talking about selling a new solution, is time to value too. So how long does it take from the time that you first get the backup solution, can you actually start using it? And we focus a lot on trying to optimize total cost of value as well. Total time to value as well. We find when the switch is happening, particularly if you're switching from another backup solution to a new backup solution, the longer it takes to actually make that switch, the more challenging the switch becomes. You're essentially moving into a production environment and kind of trying to change the wheels on the bus as it's driving down the street. But there are some tools out there that will help that will help you. If we get the who this question is specifically from, we can get them a specific answer.
All right.
And I'm sorry, very briefly. Unitrends is quite good about this. We've seen that. But whoever vendor you're looking for, you've got to pin them down on their ROI. If they have a terrific average ROI and they're bragging about the 360% usually return on investment that their customers are seeing, you've got to make sure that you get them to as close as possible to your environment, to your business case, to your needs, to your industry, so that they can tailor the ROI projection results with you to what you're actually going to be looking at.
All right. Great answers and great information, Dave and Christine. That is all the time we have in this live and interactive e-seminar. Special thanks to our experts, Christine Taylor, analyst with the Taneja Group, and David LeClaire, Vice President of Product Marketing at Unitrends, for explaining how to create a bridge to your CFO by coming to a common understanding of risk and reward with regard to a backup and recovery strategy. For additional information on this topic, please click on the green Resources widget on your screen. And thanks for joining us. For Unitrends, I'm Stan Gibson.
Thank you so much. From Taneja Group, Christine Taylor.